What's your fault emergency?
Hi, you guys have been out to my house twice today, and then most recently the deputy talked my wife into letting me in the house, and then she locked me in the garage, and I tried to break my arm, and I was trying to get back inside.
What's your address, sir?
6184 Jenks, Kenks Drive. She's currently got me locked in the garage because earlier she broke both of the big doors, and when I tried to...
What was that?
You just got me!
Born in May 1987 in the United States, Bree Kuhn spent her early years in the care of her parents and older brother, Eric Jr. While her exact birthplace remains unconfirmed, records indicate the family lived in Pennsylvania before the parents' eventual divorce. After the separation, Bree and her brother relocated to Texas with their mother, whose name has not been publicly disclosed. As shared by Eric Jr., when he reached 9th grade, Bree left Texas to live with their father, Eric, in New York. At that time, Eric had begun a new life with a woman named Karen. Despite the distance, the siblings remained close, reuniting for important moments and maintaining strong emotional ties. Their relationship with their mother, however, was fraught. According to Eric, she was physically abusive, and Bree often shielded him from the worst of it. She took on a protective older sibling role, enduring punishment herself to defend her younger brother. These formative experiences left a lasting impact. During her teenage years, Bree began grappling with depression and anxiety. By age 13, she had attempted to take her own life. Despite these challenges, she pursued education through 2 community colleges and, still in her youth, enlisted in the U.S. Navy. Over a 17-year career, Bree served in various naval stations across the country. In 2009, Bree gave birth to her first daughter, Kaylee, with her then-partner James. Their relationship eventually ended, and Bree retained custody, while James had visitation rights on weekends. Later, Bree entered a relationship with fellow military member Colin Turner. Colin, born on December 28, 1987, was raised in a devout, close-knit family in the care of his parents Terry and Donald Turner, alongside his sisters Nicole and Rebecca. He was known for his warmth and deep dedication to family. Professionally, he served in the Marine Corps, specializing in explosive ordnance disposal. Before meeting Bree, Colin had married Casey Gottsman in 2009. That same year, they welcomed a son, who remained in Casey's custody after their separation but was still raised with the love of his paternal family. Bree and Colin married on May 29, 2016, forming a new household with Bree's daughter, Kaylee. Colin embraced Kaylee as his own, and she quickly became a beloved granddaughter to the Turners. In April 2017, Bree gave birth to their son, John Patrick, followed by the arrival of their daughter, Lonnie, in August 2018. Colin retired from the Marines after 14 years of service. After retirement, he pursued a degree in electrical engineering through Arizona State University, balancing his studies with stay-at-home parenting duties, including helping Kaylee with remote learning during the COVID-19 pandemic. By this time, the family had settled in Gulf Breeze, Florida, a coastal community known for its low crime rates, recreational spaces, and family-friendly atmosphere. Outwardly, their life seemed stable and supportive. However, behind closed doors, things were more complicated. According to Eric Jr., Bree confided that their relationship had become strained. On one occasion, Eric visited in hopes that his presence might ease tensions between the couple. During that visit, Colin reportedly remarked, both privately and in front of Bree, that they got along because they were both narcissistic psychopaths. Eric also noted that Bree felt overwhelmed as the sole financial provider while Colin focused on his studies and childcare. Despite Eric's concerns and advice to leave the relationship, Bree hesitated. She feared Colin's potential legal advantage in a custody dispute, especially given her mental health history and the financial support he might receive from his family. In April 2021, Bree made another suicide attempt. While speaking on the phone with her brother, she overdosed on pills and alcohol. Eric, realizing what was happening, urgently contacted Colin, who was home with her but allegedly took no action to help. Eric then called emergency services himself. Bree was hospitalized in a psychiatric facility for about 10 days and again a month later for a week-long stay. During her recovery, Bree reported work-related stress and blamed Colin for interfering with her job, which she claimed led to further complications. However, she never publicly accused him of any psychological, physical, or sexual abuse. After her hospitalization, Bree enrolled in an intensive outpatient program and resumed work at the Naval Air Station in Pensacola as an assistant to the command chief, under a limited-duty sailor status that allowed her to continue treatment while staying engaged in her career. In the months leading up to the tragedy, Bree began seeking legal assistance. On Wednesday, September 8, 2021, she reached out to a group of mothers via a messaging app, asking for recommendations for a lawyer. She noted that the situation could turn ugly, as it involved both children and property disputes. But no legal advice could have prepared anyone for what came next. At 12:53 p.m. that same day, Bree placed a call to 911. She reported a domestic dispute with her husband and requested police assistance at their home. Within minutes, 2 officers arrived at the family's residence. The first thing they saw was Colin seated calmly in a beach chair at the edge of their driveway. Colin informed them that Bree had a shotgun and a pistol inside the bedroom. He admitted he also had a firearm stored in his truck. Colin emphasized that Bree had been the one to call the police. When asked where Bree was, Colin led one of the officers to the home's entrance and pointed toward the kitchen. As the officer entered, Bree and Colin's young son approached, curiously asking about the equipment on the officer's belt. Bree appeared shortly after, visibly frustrated. The officer explained that unless there were visible injuries or concrete proof of physical violence, there was little they could do in that moment. Bree responded with bitter sarcasm, saying that next time she would make sure her husband hit her in the face. The officer attempted to de-escalate the situation and informed her that without a court order or restraining order, they couldn't stop Colin from seeing or taking the children, especially since 2 of them were biologically his. Asked whether she wanted to file a formal complaint, Bree declined, stating she only wanted to remove her children from the house. The officer said he would speak with Colin while she packed some belongings. Outside, as officers questioned Colin about any possible physical confrontation, Bree began moving items from Colin's truck into her own vehicle. When Colin realized what she was doing, he firmly stated that he wouldn't allow her to take the kids. He claimed he was the children's primary caregiver and only wanted to take them to his parents' home in Georgia for a few days to let things cool down. He denied any intention of keeping them from her. One officer advised Colin that if there was no violence involved, police could not intervene in parenting matters. The officer also asked if Colin wished to submit a formal report, to which he agreed. paperwork was retrieved from the patrol vehicle and distributed to both parties. When Bree saw her form, she asked the officer what she should do if her husband hit her after they left. The officer advised her to keep her phone's camera recording as evidence. The officers then left. But just a few hours later, around 5 p.m., another 911 call came from the same residence. This time, it was Colin on the line. When police arrived again, they found Colin outside holding their youngest daughter. He told officers that Bree was refusing to let him back into the house. Bree emerged, attempting to take the child from Colin's arms. Officers intervened and encouraged her to return inside so they could speak calmly. After confirming that Colin lived in the house and co-owned the property, an officer told him he had a legal right to enter the home. Though not encouraging him to use force, the officer emphasized his lawful access. Colin asked the officer to accompany him inside, wary of another confrontation. As they talked, Colin explained that Bree had tried to take the child into the house, but the child had started screaming, not wanting to go inside without her father. The officer asked if there had been a physical confrontation, to which Colin said no. He added that the incident was part of an ongoing dispute dating back years. Meanwhile, Bree told officers they had been discussing divorce and that Colin wanted to take the kids to Georgia. She accused him of physical aggression, stating the earlier police visit had failed to protect her. She also claimed Colin had contacted her superiors at work, possibly making emotional abuse allegations. The officer reiterated that Bree could not legally prevent Colin from entering his own home. He suggested they find a temporary arrangement, separate bedrooms, limited contact, for the sake of the children. But Bree refused, insisting that allowing him in could result in further violence. She again mentioned her prior abuse allegation and expressed concern about being hurt once more. Again, the officer told her to record anything that happened. But Bree clearly wanted more than advice. She wanted protection that the system, at that point, could not provide. When the officer suggested everyone enter the house together, Bree refused. The officer then turned to Colin, who calmly provided the children's information. During the exchange, Colin mentioned Bree's mental health issues. The officer acknowledged this, noting he had previously responded to a crisis at the home in March when Bree had attempted to take her life. He reminded Colin of the same advice given back then: remain separated within the home for the safety of everyone involved. He also pointed out that standing outside in the intense heat with a small child amid biting mosquitoes was unsustainable. Before heading inside again, Colin asked the officer to retrieve his wallet, which Bree had allegedly taken from his vehicle. At the door, Bree met the officer. When asked about the wallet, she denied having it and said she had only taken Colin's credit card. The officer reminded her that a wallet is personal property, not something shared in marriage, and instructed her to return it if she had taken it. In a calm but firm tone, the officer told Bree she had to allow Colin and their daughter back into the home. Bree agreed, but only on the condition that Colin would not harass her or the children. The officer reassured her that if anything happened, she could call them again. As the officer prepared to leave, he returned to inform Colin that Bree claimed not to know where the wallet was. Colin simply smiled, suggesting he'd let it go, but nothing would be let go. Less than 2 hours later, at exactly 6:22 p.m., a third and final 911 call came from the Turner residence. Colin Turner, just 33 years old, had been fatally shot. The final fatal gunshot rang out while the 911 operator was still on the line. On the porch, officers found Bree, then 34, sitting calmly. As they approached, she spontaneously confessed she had shot her husband. She was taken into custody without resistance. When asked about the children, Bree said she had taken them to a neighbor who lived a few houses down. Paramedics checked her over while officers made sure she was physically stable. When asked if she could breathe properly or needed medical care, she didn't respond, so emergency personnel were instructed to evaluate her. Bree was taken to the police station for questioning. The interrogation was slow, fragmented by long silences and frequent crying. Bree managed to recount the long-term dynamics of her marriage. She described Colin as the primary caregiver and said that she felt she had no chance of obtaining custody because of her mental health history. In scattered phrases, Bree explained that Colin had threatened to take the children to Georgia and had physically assaulted her. She said he warned her that if she reported him, no one would believe her because she was crazy. Bree admitted to removing the batteries from the garage door opener to prevent Colin from leaving with the kids. She insisted he was faking concern about her mental health as a manipulation tactic because she had finally decided to file for divorce. She told investigators she had a legal appointment set for the following day. When asked what happened in the moments leading up to the shooting, Bree said her memory was blurry after the second police visit. She claimed Colin tried to get into the house again through the garage, but was blocked. There was still a side door leading inside, and according to Bree, Colin used it to re-enter the home. That's when, she said, she tried to stop him. The next thing she remembered, she was knocking on a neighbor's door, delivering her children to safety, and returning, she said, to help her husband. Investigators pushed for more clarity. They wanted a coherent explanation, something that could make sense of what had happened. Bree offered only fragments. She returned to the garage and saw blood everywhere. Throughout the interrogation, Bree repeatedly asked to call her father. Eventually, she was given a phone and managed to reach him. The 18-minute call was mostly filled with sobs. Her father tried to console her, telling her she would likely spend the night in jail and urging her to reach out if she felt like harming herself again. He reminded her that things could get better, to hold on and find the light at the end of the tunnel. Toward the end of the call, Bree asked if her father could take custody of her two youngest children. He didn't give her a clear answer, only saying they needed to speak with Colin's mother. He also encouraged her to cooperate with a public defender if necessary until a better legal option became available. Bree then confessed something heartbreaking. She didn't know what was worse, knowing Colin was dead or realizing that she was the one who had killed him. A month later, in early October 2021, a Santa Rosa County grand jury indicted Bree Kuhn for first-degree premeditated murder in the death of her husband, Colin James Turner. The prosecution had not yet announced whether they would pursue a sentence of life imprisonment or the death penalty. On October 16th, Colin's family and friends gathered to say their final goodbye at a military funeral honoring his 14 years of service with the U.S. Marine Corps. The American flag, symbolizing his service, was handed to his eldest son, Brody Turner. Left without either parent, his youngest kids were taken in by their paternal grandparents, who embraced them with love, trying to mend what could never fully heal. After 3 years of delays, on Tuesday, September 24, 2024, the long-awaited trial of Bree Kuhn, now 37, began in the Santa Rosa County Courthouse. The prosecution painted the act as a cold-blooded, calculated murder. He methodically outlined the timeline of September 8, 2021, arguing that Bree had deliberately ended her husband's life after a day of escalating tension. The defense took a very different approach. They claimed Bree had been a victim of battered woman syndrome, suffering years of psychological and emotional abuse at the hands of a husband who had become increasingly unstable after suffering a traumatic brain injury in the military. They argued that Colin posed a serious threat to both Bree and the children. Over 4 days, the court heard testimony from a range of witnesses. The jury and courtroom audience watched the full body cam footage from the responding officers, showing each police interaction on the day of the incident. Viewers heard Bree's sarcasm, Colin's calm demeanor, and finally, the chilling 911 call where gunshots were captured live. Every officer involved testified in court. One confirmed responding to a previous suicide attempt by Bree months earlier. Another described the crime scene in detail: the garage, the blood, the body of Colin slumped in a chair, the weapon in its holster nearby. A crime scene analyst presented a series of photographs, helping jurors visualize where Colin's body had been found, far from the home's entry, seated on a portable cooler, consistent with a stationary victim. Shell casings, bullet fragments, and even Colin's phone, still connected to the 911 operator, were found beneath him. Prescriptions linked to Bree's ADHD and mental health treatments were introduced into evidence, as was the testimony of Cray Forum, Bree's supervisor at the Pensacola Naval Station. Forum testified that Bree had been on limited duty due to mental health concerns. He said that on the day of the shooting, Bree failed to report for work, and Colin had called him saying Bree had cut off access to family finances and sabotaged household electronics. Colin also told Forum that Bree had missed therapy sessions and that he was considering taking the children to Georgia. Forum testified that Colin was calm and composed during the call. He offered Colin contact information for a family counselor and later spoke to Bree, who claimed her husband was lying and planning to take the kids unjustly. On the second day of trial, the prosecution called forensic pathologist Dr. Diana Oleski to the stand. Although she had not performed the autopsy on Colin Turner herself, the original medical examiner had died in a car accident before the trial. Dr. Oleski had reviewed the findings and prepared to present the conclusions. She confirmed what the autopsy had revealed. Colin had been shot 4 times, all from behind. The bullets entered between his shoulders and his chest. One particularly devastating shot had traveled from his left shoulder, exited through the side of his neck, and ultimately lodged in his right wrist. The cumulative trauma included punctured lungs, fractured ribs and cervical vertebrae, a ruptured spleen, spinal cord damage, and injury to the pericardium, the membrane around the heart. Dr. Oleski concluded that Colin would have survived for only a couple of minutes following the pericardial injury. When questioned by the defense about whether there was any sign of a broken arm, as Colin had claimed Bree tried to break it during the 911 call, Dr. Oleski said there were no injuries to support that claim. Next to testify was Eric Kuhn, Bree's brother. Eric described being on the phone with Bree the day she attempted suicide months earlier. She told him she had taken pills with alcohol. He claimed Colin hadn't responded with concern when informed. He didn't call for help, so Eric did. Eric added that Bree had long feared losing her children, believing Colin's family's financial advantage and legal resources gave them the upper hand. On the day of the shooting, he said Bree was anxious due to an unspecified surgery she had scheduled and was convinced Colin would exploit her recovery period to take the children. Eric testified that he spoke to his sister several times that day. Her mood fluctuated, sometimes calm, sometimes distressed. During a final call lasting around 45 minutes, he said he heard her arguing with Colin, heard shouting and objects being thrown. Then, he claimed, Bree picked up a gun. When asked how he knew this, Eric hesitated, then said he believed Bree had told him. Eric begged his sister to leave with the kids. He said she didn't listen. The last thing he heard before the call ended were Bree's words, "You're not going to take the kids." Then, gunshots, children crying, Bree's voice repeating, "Oh my God, I killed him. I have to call the police." Yet Eric's testimony faltered under cross-examination. He gave differing accounts from what he had originally told detectives in Pennsylvania, blaming inconsistencies on the claim that his first interview hadn't been recorded, something the detective firmly denied. With that, the prosecution rested. The defense, which had initially announced it would present testimony from a mental health expert and Bree herself to support a battered woman syndrome argument, abruptly changed course. Neither the expert nor Bree testified. No explanation was made public. Instead, the defense called James, Bree's ex-husband, who is also the biological father of her eldest daughter, Kaylee. James testified that on the day of the shooting, he exchanged texts with Colin. He also received a phone call from Bree, who told him directly, "You need to come get Kaylee." "I just shot Colin." When he asked why, she simply said, "I don't know." James rushed to retrieve his daughter. He told the court he had always believed Colin was a great stepfather. Kaylee had spoken highly of him. Due to a hurricane warning, the third day of trial was cut short. On Friday, September 27th, the court reconvened for closing arguments. The prosecution argued that Bree had no visible injuries on the day of the shooting and had deliberately provoked Colin while secretly recording the altercation with her phone and keeping her brother on the line. The prosecution concluded this was the true motive, not self-defense, but control. They said that when Bree couldn't provoke Colin into aggression, she took matters into her own hands, shooting him 4 times in the back, unaware that he was on the phone with 911. The defense countered that Colin had been walking around the home with a firearm and had hidden it in his truck before police first arrived. They pointed to the 911 call where Colin alleged Bree tried to break his arm, something not supported by the autopsy. One defense attorney even mocked Colin's 911 call, saying a Marine should have been able to get through a locked door, and insinuated that others in his elite unit would have laughed at his reaction. Finally, the defense claimed the shooting was the result of police failure to protect Bree after multiple pleas for help. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours before returning with a guilty verdict. Before sentencing, the judge allowed impact statements from Colin's parents. Colin's mother spoke first. She said she was grateful to have her grandchildren and hoped to adopt them officially. She condemned Bree not only for taking her son's life, but for trying to tarnish his reputation. Colin's father appeared even more affected. He said the children were doing well in school and were surrounded by love. He expressed disappointment in Bree's actions both before and after the shooting. Then, the judge issued Bree Coon's sentence. She was sentenced to life in prison. Though this might seem like the conclusion, the story continues. On October 3, 2024, Bree's legal team filed an appeal with the Florida Court of Appeals. They are challenging her conviction and requesting a new trial. Meanwhile, Bree was not subjected to disciplinary military action. She was discharged with a general discharge under honorable conditions after 17 years of service in the U.S. Navy. But for the children, no court ruling or appeal can undo what happened. Still, the questions remain. Could this tragedy have been prevented? Was Bree acting in self-defense, as her lawyers claim? Or did Colin, a man with no prior convictions or history of violence, fall victim to a moment of irreversible fear and desperation? Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.